The council chamber on Prime gleamed with soft blue light. 300 species had gathered here, representatives from every corner of the galaxy. They sat in elegant seats that adjusted to each species' unique biology, breathing filtered air that perfectly suited their needs. Everything about the place spoke of civilization, of harmony, of peace. Ambassador Sarah walked through the massive doors, and the murmuring stopped. She wore a simple gray suit, her black hair pulled back in a practical knot. Behind her came 5 other humans, each carrying data tablets and looking around with barely contained wonder. This was humanity's moment. After 200 years of space travel, after decades of careful diplomacy, Earth was finally applying for membership in the Galactic Council. The representative stood to greet them. He was beautiful in the way his species always were, with flowing robes that seemed to be made of liquid light and skin that shimmered with colors humans had no names for. His smile was warm and welcoming as he gestured to the speaking platform. Climbed the steps and activated the holographic display. An image of Earth appeared above the platform, blue and white and utterly familiar to her. She began her presentation. She told them about Earth's history, about humanity's journey from caves to spacecraft, about their culture and their dreams. Then she showed them the data. Earth specifications appeared in neat columns that every species could read. The gravity measurement came first, watched as several representatives leaned forward to check their translators. Surely there was an error. A counselor, her crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns, spoke up. Ambassador, could you verify Earth's surface gravity? Our systems show 9.8 meters per second squared. That cannot be correct. It's correct, said quietly. The representative laughed. It was a pleasant sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Forgive me, Ambassador, but that's nearly twice the galactic standard. How do you even stand upright? Felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice level. We evolved there. It's normal for us. The laughter spread through the chamber. It wasn't cruel, not exactly. It was the laughter of disbelief, of people hearing something so absurd they couldn't help but react. Continued her presentation, but each new fact made it worse. Earth's atmospheric pressure, high enough to crush most species. Temperature range, from freezing deserts to boiling jungles, sometimes separated by mere kilometers. Weather systems, violent storms that could flatten cities, tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards. Tectonic activity, constant earthquakes, volcanoes spewing toxic gases and molten rock. Solar radiation, barely filtered by a thin magnetic field and a fragile layer of gas. And the life forms? Asked the general, his scaled face twisted in what might have been concern or disgust. What other creatures inhabit this world? Pulled up images, sharks with rows of razor teeth, bears that could tear through metal, microscopic bacteria that could kill in hours, insects that carried deadly diseases, plants that could poison with a touch. The gallery went on and on. The chamber had gone quiet. The laughter had died away, replaced by something that felt like pity. The crystalline spoke again, her voice gentle. Ambassador, we mean no disrespect to your species, but we must ask, how did intelligence evolve under such conditions? How did you survive long enough to build civilization? We adapted, said. We learned, we worked together. General R of the Empire stood. He was a military officer, disciplined and direct. I have reviewed your military capabilities as part of this application. With respect, Ambassador, they are inadequate for council membership. Your soldiers require constant supplies of water. They cannot function outside a narrow temperature range. They have no natural armor or weapons. They are, by any measure, fragile. Wanted to argue to defend her species, but she knew the numbers. Human soldiers did need water, lots of it. They did struggle in extreme temperatures. Compared to with their armored scales or with their 6 limbs and natural weapons, humans looked weak. R continued, pulling up displays of human military equipment. Your ships are slow. Your weapons use chemical explosions to propel metal projectiles. You lack energy shields, quantum drives, or even basic graviton manipulation. You are centuries behind the minimum technological threshold. The vote came swiftly. 300 species, 300 votes against. Humanity was classified as a protected developing species, restricted to their home system until they could meet minimum standards. They were assigned to monitor Earth, a task their representative accepted with a gracious bow. As the human delegation prepared to leave, heard the conversations around her. The council members spoke freely now, no longer worried about diplomatic niceties. Class 12, one said, his voice full of wonder. I've never even heard of a species from a Class 12 achieving. It's unprecedented, another agreed. Most Class 12 worlds don't support life at all. Those that do usually kill off any species before they develop agriculture. Poor things, a third added. Imagine growing up in such horror, no wonder they're so primitive. The representative approached as she gathered her materials. Please don't take this personally, Ambassador. The Council simply has standards. Once your species has developed properly, once you've evolved past the need for such barbaric technology and harsh military practices, you'll be welcomed with open arms. Looked at him, this beautiful being from a world where the biggest danger was probably a light drizzle. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived 3 major hurricanes. She thought about her father, who had climbed mountains just to prove he could. She thought about humanity's history, written in blood and sweat and endless, stubborn refusal to give up. Thank you for your time, she said simply. On the observation deck of the Perseverance, stood and watched Prime shrink in the distance. Her second-in-command, James, joined her. He was quiet for a long moment before speaking. They have no idea, do they? No, said, they don't. What do we do now? Turned from the window. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had climbed out of Earth's crushing gravity well, who had survived in the void of space, who had crossed light years just to be laughed at by creatures who thought paradise worlds made them civilized. We go home, she said. We keep building, we keep learning, and we remember this day. You think we'll get another chance? Smiled, but there was something hard in it, something that came from growing up on a world that tried to kill you every single day and failing to break. The galaxy is a big place, James. Dangerous place. Sooner or later, they're going to need someone who knows how to fight. The Perseverance turned toward home, toward the yellow sun that bathed Earth in radiation, toward the planet that had forged humanity in fire and ice and endless struggle. Behind them, the Galactic Council returned to their business, dismissing the strange as a curiosity, a footnote in galactic history. They would remember this mistake. In the deep dark between stars, something stirred, something that had been traveling for, consuming everything in its path, something that cared nothing for beauty or civilization or harmony. The Devourers had found a new galaxy, and they were hungry. But the Council didn't know that yet. They sat in their comfortable chambers on their gentle worlds, secure in the knowledge that they were safe, that their advanced civilization and sophisticated technology would protect them from any threat. They had never met a threat from a Class 12. They had never needed to learn what humanity knew in its bones, that survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the... Survival is about refusing to die, no matter what the universe throws at you. The galaxy had laughed at humans. Soon, it would learn why that was a mistake. Soon, it would learn what happens when you mock the species that crawled out of hell itself. Soon, but not yet. For now, humanity returned home, patient and preparing, waiting for the day when the galaxy would need them. And that day was coming, faster than anyone imagined. 18 months passed. Earth continued its development, ignored by a galaxy that had dismissed them as irrelevant. Human scientists studied the technology they'd glimpsed at the Council, trying to bridge the gaps in their understanding. Human soldiers trained, adapting their tactics for potential conflicts in space. Human leaders debated and planned, preparing for a future they couldn't quite see but knew was coming. On Prime, life continued in peaceful routine. The Council met regularly to discuss trade disputes, border adjustments, and cultural exchanges. Wars were rare, usually settled through negotiation or economic pressure. The galaxy had been at peace for 3,000 years. Then the Devourers arrived. The first world to fall was Theta Chrysalis, a garden planet on the outer rim. The distress call lasted only minutes before cutting off. When Council ships arrived to investigate 3 days later, they found nothing. No cities, no people, no life at all. Even the oceans had been drained. The planet was a gray ball of rock, completely stripped. The Council declared it an anomaly, a natural disaster, perhaps, or some unknown weapon test gone wrong. They increased patrols in the sector and waited for more information. 2 weeks later, 6 more worlds went silent. General R stood in the command center on Prime, staring at the tactical display. Red markers spread across the map like a disease. 14 worlds now, 23 billion sentients gone. His scales had lost their usual luster, dulled by stress and lack of sleep. "Show me the enemy again," he ordered. The hologram shifted, displaying footage from the last scout ship to escape the latest attack. The quality was poor, the image shaking as the ship fled, but it was enough. The Devourers looked like nothing in the Council's databases. Living ships, if they could be called that, with hulls that seemed to writhe and pulse. They moved in swarms, thousands of them, descending on planets like insects on carrion. "Analysis?" R asked. His aide, a young named N, pulled up the data. "They're organic, sir. Our energy weapons barely slow them down. They absorb the blasts somehow, maybe even feed on them. Kinetic weapons are more effective, but we don't have enough ships equipped with them." "What about ground forces?" N's colors dimmed, a sign of distress in his species. "Worse, sir, they send down these creatures. We don't have a better word for them. They're fast, adaptable, and they work together perfectly. Our troops can't hold against them. The 7th Legion made a stand on Vega. They lasted 40 minutes. R felt something cold settle in his chest. The 7th Legion was the pride of the military, 10,000 of the finest warriors in the galaxy. They had never lost a battle. Casualties? "Total, sir, no survivors." The command center was silent. Officers from a dozen species stood at their stations, staring at screens that showed the slow death of civilization. They had no frame of reference for this. The galaxy had been peaceful for so long that war had become theoretical, something studied in history but never experienced. "We need reinforcements," R said. "Pull back the border fleets, consolidate our forces. We'll make a stand at VII. If we can stop them there, we can buy time to develop new weapons." "Sir," N said quietly, "at current rate of advancement, they'll reach VII in 3 weeks. We'll have maybe 200 ships in position by then. They've been bringing thousands to each battle." R knew what he had to say, but the words felt like poison. He was a species that prided itself on martial honor and self-sufficiency. What he was about to propose went against everything he believed. But he was also a soldier, and soldiers did what was necessary. "Contact, though," he said. The command center erupted in protests. A dozen voices spoke at once, arguing against the idea. Humans were primitive, barely capable of space travel. Their technology was outdated, their ships were slow, their weapons were crude. What could they possibly offer against an enemy that had crushed the finest forces in the galaxy? The crystalline counselor raised one delicate limb for silence. When the room quieted, she spoke. "General R is correct. We have no choice." "Counselor," the representative protested, "the humans are centuries behind us. They can't even generate energy shields. How would they fight the Devourers?" A's crystalline face was unreadable, but her voice carried certainty. "I have been reviewing Earth's history since the humans departed. Do you know what I learned? That planet tried to kill them every single day of their evolution. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, climate shifts that would have wiped out any of our species. And yet they survived. More than survived, they conquered their world. They didn't do it with advanced technology or energy shields. They did it with stubbornness and violence, and a complete refusal to accept defeat. She gestured to the tactical display, where red markers showed the Devourer advance. Look at what we're facing. An enemy that doesn't negotiate, doesn't retreat, doesn't stop. An enemy that adapts to our weapons and overwhelms our positions through sheer aggression. Does that sound familiar? It should. It sounds exactly like the environment that created humanity. R nodded slowly. Every species in this chamber evolved on worlds where cooperation and harmony were survival traits. We are civilized because our planets rewarded civilization. But humans evolved on a world where everything was an enemy. They learned to fight before they learned to talk. Maybe that's exactly what we need now. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, desperation won. The Council authorized the transmission, a simple message sent to Earth via quantum relay. We need your help. On Earth, in the Council chamber of the United Earth Government, Sarah read the message 3 times. She'd been expecting something like this. The reports of alien attacks had reached Earth weeks ago, but seeing it in writing still sent a chill down her spine. They're asking for military aid, she said to the assembled leaders. President, a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, leaned back in her chair. After they rejected us, after they laughed at us. Yes. What are they offering in return? Pulled up the terms. Full council membership upon completion of military operations, complete access to their technology databases, and our forces operate under human command with human rules of engagement. They're desperate, said. They're dying, corrected. The Devourers have taken 47 worlds in 3 months. If they're not stopped, the entire galaxy falls. The room fell silent. These were people who remembered the rejection, who had felt the shame of being dismissed as primitives. The temptation to refuse must have been strong, but knew her species better than that. We'll help them, said finally. Not because they deserve it, not because we owe them anything, but because it's the right thing to do, and because if we don't, there won't be a galaxy left to reject us. Madame President, the Secretary of Defense said, our forces aren't designed for this kind of conflict. We've been preparing for theoretical battles, not an all-out war of extinction. Then we adapt, said. That's what we do, isn't it? That's what we've always done. Composed the response, her fingers steady on the keyboard. She thought about the representative with his beautiful robes and his condescending smile. She thought about the council chamber and the laughter. She thought about Earth, hanging in space like a blue marble, humanity's crucible and home. Earth agrees to provide military assistance under the stated terms, she wrote. Forces will deploy immediately. Hold the line until we arrive. She sent the message and looked up at, how long until we can mobilize? The fleet's been on standby since the attack started, said. We can have ships in transit within 48 hours. How many? 200 warships, 30,000 ground troops, everything we can spare without leaving Earth defenseless. It didn't sound like much, not compared to the thousands of council ships that had already fallen, but remembered something her grandfather had told her back when she was a little girl learning about World War II. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, he'd said. It's the size of the fight in the dog. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had a lot of fight in them. 3 days later, the human fleet arrived at VII. General R watched from the Council command ship as 200 vessels dropped out of FTL transit. They didn't look like Council ships, with their smooth curves and elegant designs. These were brutal things, all angles and armor plating, covered in weapons that looked primitive but undeniably lethal. The lead ship opened communications. A human woman appeared on screen, wearing military uniform and an expression that reminded R of his most hardened veterans. "This is Admiral of the United Earth Forces. We're here to help." "Admiral," R said, trying to keep the doubt out of his voice. "The Devourers have already landed on VII. The city of New Harbor is completely overrun. We've written it off as a loss and are establishing a defensive perimeter 50 kilometers out." "Understood. We're deploying to New Harbor immediately." R's scales rippled in agitation. "Admiral, you misunderstand. The city is lost. There are thousands of Devourers there. Landing in that zone would be suicide." Smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "General, we're from Earth. We don't know how to do anything else." The human ships dove toward the planet, ignoring the carefully prepared defensive positions. R watched in horror as they headed straight for New Harbor, where his sensors showed massive concentrations of Devourer forces. This wasn't a military operation. This was mass suicide. The first human hit the ground in the middle of the city. Armored soldiers poured out, 30 in each ship, spreading out in practiced formations. The Devourers swarmed immediately, thousands of them, moving with the same overwhelming aggression that had crushed every Council defense. R expected to watch the humans die. What he saw instead changed everything he thought he knew about warfare. The humans didn't establish perimeters. They didn't call for support. They simply opened fire. The sound was incredible, a roar of chemical explosives that echoed across the command ship's sensors. The humans' weapons were crude compared to Council technology, but there was something brutal about them, something visceral. And they worked. The Devourers fell in waves. "Sir," N said, his colors shifting rapidly. "The humans are advancing. They're pushing into the densest concentrations of Devourers." "That's insane," R muttered. But it was happening. The humans moved through the city like a force of nature, clearing buildings room by room, street by street. When Devourers surrounded a position, the humans didn't retreat. They fought harder. When they ran low on ammunition, they switched to explosives. When those ran out, they used blades. R pulled up the casualty reports and felt sick. The humans were taking losses that would have caused any Council species to surrender. But they didn't stop. When one soldier fell, another took their place. When a position was overrun, the humans detonated their own equipment and fell back to the next defensive point. "They're fighting like the planet itself is at stake," N whispered. "No," R said, finally understanding. "They're fighting like they always do, like they learned to on that. They're not trying to win cleanly. They're just trying to survive, and they're very, very good at surviving." The battle for New Harbor lasted 16 hours. When it ended, the city was rubble. 3,000 human soldiers were dead or wounded, but the Devourers were gone, wiped out to the last creature. R contacted Admiral. She appeared on screen, her face covered in dust and blood. "Admiral, your casualties are acceptable," she cut him off. "Where do you need us next?" "But you lost nearly 40% of your ground forces." His expression didn't change. "General, we came here to fight. Point us at the enemy." R looked at this human woman, this creature from a world that should never have produced intelligent life, and felt something he hadn't felt in months: hope. The Devourers were still coming. The war was far from over. But for the first time since this nightmare began, the galaxy had soldiers who knew how to fight in hell. Because they'd been born there. The war changed after VII. Word spread through the Council fleets. The humans had won. It didn't matter that they'd taken terrible losses, that their tactics seemed suicidal by any rational measure. What mattered was that they'd landed in a zone every other species had declared hopeless, and they'd won. More human forces arrived each week. Earth was stripping itself of defenses, sending everything they could spare to the front lines. The ships came loaded with soldiers who volunteered faster than they could be deployed. Young men and women who'd grown up hearing stories about the galaxy that had rejected them, now rushing to defend it. General R found himself working closely with the humans, learning their methods, trying to understand what made them so effective. He attended strategy sessions where human officers planned operations that made his scales itch with worry. They talked about acceptable losses, calculated risks, and fighting retreats in ways no council species ever had. You have to understand, Colonel Maria Reeves explained during one meeting. On Earth, everything is a calculated risk. Every time our ancestors left their caves, they risked death. Every hunt, every harvest, every winter, they could all be fatal. We evolved to assess danger and act anyway. But you feel fear, R said. I've seen your biometric data in combat. Your heart rates spike, your stress hormones flood your systems. You're terrified. Reeves smiled. Of course we're terrified. Fear is what keeps you alive. The difference is, we learned a long time ago that being afraid doesn't mean you stop. It means you're still breathing. The Battle of Meridian Ring taught the galaxy exactly what that meant. The Devourers launched a massive assault on the ring station that guarded 3 major trade routes. If it fell, the Council's core worlds would be cut off from each other. The station had to hold. The Council's defensive plan was sound. Establish overlapping fields of fire, maintain supply lines, and prepare fallback positions. The humans reviewed the plan and made one critical change. When the Devourers came, a human battalion would deploy outside the station, directly into the swarm's path. It's a delaying tactic, Admiral explained. They'll buy the station time to prepare defenses. They'll die, R said flatly. Yes. And they volunteered for this. Every single one. R watched as 500 human soldiers suited up in the station's deployment bay. They checked their weapons, embraced their comrades, and boarded the. Some were old enough to be grandparents. Others looked barely out of adolescence. All of them knew exactly what they were flying into. He stopped one of them, a young woman with corporal's insignia and nervous hands. Why are you doing this? You could stay on the station. You could live. She looked at him with eyes that seemed too old for her face. Because someone has to, sir, and we're good at it. The battle outside Meridian Ring lasted 6 hours. The human battalion held the Devourers at that single point, channeling the swarm into a killing field while the station's guns tore them apart. The humans fought with a ferocity that seemed to grow stronger as their numbers dwindled. When they ran out of ammunition, they used explosives. When those were gone, they used their armored suits as weapons, charging into the Devourers in melee combat. None of them survived, but the station held, and 3,000 Devourers died trying to break through that single battalion. R attended the memorial service. The humans were matter-of-fact about their losses, reading names and ranks with steady voices. No one cried, though he could see the pain in their faces. After the service, he approached Admiral. I don't understand your species, he admitted. You sacrifice so much so easily. Don't you value your lives? More than you can imagine, said quietly. That's why we fight so hard, because we know exactly what we're protecting. We've almost lost everything before, General. Many times. We know what extinction feels like. Your world, R said, understanding dawning. The ice ages, the volcanic winters, the plagues. You've nearly died out multiple times. 6 times that we know of, confirmed. Once our population dropped below 10,000 individuals, we survived by refusing to quit, by making impossible choices, by sacrificing the few for the many. It's in our bones now. This instinct to protect, to fight, to survive no matter the cost. The war ground on. Months passed. The humans kept winning battles and the Devourers kept coming. The casualties mounted on both sides. Earth sent more soldiers, more ships, more of their precious resources to a galaxy that had rejected them. And slowly, incredibly, the tide began to turn. But there was a cost. R saw it in the human forces. They were worn down, exhausted not just physically but in some deeper way. The initial volunteers had been replaced by second and third waves. The experienced soldiers developed a 1,000-yard stare that transcended species. They still fought with the same intensity, but something fundamental was being ground away. He found Admiral on the observation deck of her flagship, staring out at the stars. She'd aged in the past 6 months, lines deepening around her eyes. "We're losing people faster than we can train replacements," she said without preamble. "Earth is running out of soldiers to send. Another 6 months like this, and we'll have nothing left." "You could withdraw," R suggested. "The Council would understand. You've done more than anyone could have asked." Laughed a bitter sound. Would they? Would they really understand if we left them to die after coming this far? Would we understand? She shook her head. "No, General, we finish this one way or another." "Then we need to change strategy," R said. "We've been fighting defensively, reacting to their attacks. We need to take the fight to them." "You're talking about tracking them back to their source." "Yes, find their command ship, their queen or central brain or whatever coordinates them. Destroy it and the swarm fragments." "It's suicide," said, but she was smiling now, that same hard smile had worn when Earth was rejected. "Which means we're perfect for it." The plan came together over weeks of reconnaissance and analysis. The Devourers were coordinated by a massive queenship deep in their territory. Destroying it would require penetrating through layers of defense that had never been breached. The strike force would be cut off, with no possibility of extraction. Success or death were the only options. R expected to lead a force of humans with perhaps token support from other species. What he got instead surprised him. The sent 2 companies of their finest warriors, the provided combat engineers. Even the, who'd never been a military culture, sent medical teams. 57 species contributed to the strike force. But the core was human. 2,000 soldiers, representing Earth's best and most experienced fighters. They gathered on the staging station, checking equipment and making final preparations. R walked among them, awed by what he saw. These weren't the scared volunteers of 6 months ago. These were hardened veterans of a war unlike anything the galaxy had seen, warriors forged in the same crucible that had created their species. Colonel Reeves found him before the departure. "General, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For giving us a chance. For seeing past the laughter and the rejection. For understanding that sometimes the galaxy needs monsters to fight monsters." "You're not monsters," R said firmly. "No," Reeves smiled sadly. "We come from a world that tried to kill us every day. We learned to fight by fighting everything, our environment, our predators, each other. We spread across our planet not through cooperation but through conquest. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times before we reached the stars. If that's not monstrous, I don't know what is. And yet you're here, ready to die for species that laughed at you." "That's the other thing we learned on Earth," Reeves said. "Pack loyalty. When we choose to protect something, we protect it with everything we have. The galaxy might have rejected us, but it's still worth saving." The strike force launched at dawn. 200 ships, half of them human, disappeared into Devourer territory. Communications would be impossible once they penetrated the enemy's defenses. The Council could only wait and hope. 3 days passed with no word. The Council chamber on Prime was silent, representatives standing vigil. On Earth, billions watched their screens, waiting for news of fathers and mothers and children who might already be dead. On the 4th day, the skis began to change. The Devourer swarms that had been pressing forward on a dozen fronts suddenly stopped. They milled about in confusion, their perfect coordination gone. Council forces, hardly daring to hope, pressed forward and found the Devourers withdrawing, breaking apart into isolated groups. The Queenship was dead. The surviving ships of the strike force began limping back, battered and barely functional. Of the 200 vessels that departed, 37 returned. Of the 2,000 human soldiers, less than 600 survived. But they'd done it. They'd ended the war. R was on the dock when Admiral's ship landed. She emerged on a stretcher, her left arm missing below the elbow, her uniform burnt and torn. But she was smiling. "We got it, General." "I know, the whole galaxy knows." "Good," she closed her eyes. "Wake me when there's another war." The galaxy mourned its dead. 70 billion sentients had died during the Devourer War. Hundreds of worlds were destroyed. The Council's proud fleets were shattered, but they'd survived barely thanks to the they'd rejected. The memorial was held on Prime. Every species sent representatives. The names of the fallen were read aloud, a recitation that took 3 days. Human names were mixed among the others, soldiers who died far from the blue world that had made them strong enough to win. Ambassador stood before the council chamber, older now, grayer, but with the same determination she'd shown at that first meeting. The chamber was full, but there was no laughter this time. Only respect and perhaps a little fear. The vote for human membership was unanimous, but there was more. The council proposed what they called the doctrine. Any species facing extinction could request aid from humanity, and humanity would answer. It was an acknowledgement of something the galaxy had learned at terrible cost. Sometimes you needed someone from hell to fight the devils. Accepted on behalf of Earth, but she had conditions. "We'll help anyone who needs it. We'll fight anyone who threatens the innocent. But never forget what you learned from this war. Never forget that the traits you mocked, our aggression, our stubbornness, our refusal to accept defeat, those are the traits that saved you. We come from hell, and that makes us very, very good at fighting in it." General R, now retired and serving as a council historian, updated Earth's classification in the Galactic database. He created a new designation, Guardian Species. His official note read, "They come from the world in known space. They evolved to fight, to struggle, to survive against impossible odds. We laughed at them for it. We were fools. The galaxy now has guardians born from the crucible of hell itself. May we never need them again, but if we do, they'll answer." The ceremony ended. Representatives departed to rebuild and heal. Stood in the empty chamber, remembering that day 18 months ago when Earth had been rejected. She thought about all the soldiers who died, all the sacrifices made, all the pain endured. Approached the same representative who'd laughed at Earth's presentation. His colors were subdued now, apologetic. "Ambassador, I wanted to apologize. We were wrong about your species." Looked at him, this beautiful being from a paradise world who'd never known true hardship. She could have been angry, could have thrown his words back in his face. Instead, she just felt tired. "You weren't wrong," she said. We are aggressive and violent and dangerously stubborn. That's all true, but you were wrong about what that meant. You thought it made us weak. We proved it makes us strong." "We need your help now," the said quietly. "Pirates are raiding our colony worlds. We don't know how to fight back." "We'll help," said immediately. "That's what Guardians do." Earth's colony ships began launching soon after, spreading humanity throughout the galaxy. Not fleeing there, but expanding, growing, taking their place among the stars. And wherever they went, they brought with them the lessons of a planet that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Never give up, never surrender, protect the weak, fight the monsters, survive no matter the cost. The galaxy would never laugh at humans again, but more importantly, it would never face extinction alone. The had answered the call, and they would keep answering it for as long as the galaxy needed them. Because that's